If there's one thing that you could change about Toronto, what would it be?
Easy. The TTC. People in these streets be wildin', okay? It's making me miss the Durham region for real.
Dysh. Dysh. Dysh.
Hey y'all, it's Onika.
And J.R.
And you are dishing with DaintyDysh. How you doing, J.R.?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Onika?
I am great. So what you been up to?
I've been working, but the TTC is still getting on my nerves. I spent 30 minutes sitting in a train at Kennedy Station 2 days ago. Today, I spent another 20 minutes just sitting on a train between Kennedy and Castle Frank. It was
That's crazy. I'm having a problem with TTC buses and the people that are on them. I was on the 75 because I had therapy today, so it's mental health day for me in my life, and I was on the 75, and this woman just so entitled says to the bus driver, "You hit me with the door." She's supposed to be behind the yellow line. Yeah. "You hit me with the door. You should warn people that you're going to open the door." It was ridiculous. Then some old guy chimed in and he's like, "I've got places to go." And the guy sitting down beside him all of a sudden says, "Stop yelling in my ear." It was a shit show. It was literally a 5-minute ride. And that all happened in 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
It was a 5-minute ride. Shit you not.
You know, it's crazy that you're talking about how people are on the bus. I'm reading the book Sapiens right now about human nature. You
were telling me.
And how, Homo sapiens and all the other human type creatures that used to live on the earth, how, we as humans got rid of them and kind of became the only ones left, and how, religion has developed, and, culture and just how we live. And it kind of strips away everything. And it kind of just, it makes me say, wow, that's all.
It makes me say we're literally all kinds of crazy.
Yeah,
that's a good segue into the episode today. We are doing it's the second Wednesday of the month, and it is all kinds of crazy.
Yeah, and we had some great feedback with our guest last month, so we've decided to do another guest this month.
Of course, and we have her here with us. It is Nadine Thornhill. Say hi to everyone, Nadine.
Hello, everyone.
So, did you want to weigh in? I saw you laughing at my story about the TTC. Did you have any horrible TTC stories you wanted to tell?
All right, so I don't have a horrible TTC story to tell because last week I was in Ottawa. So I have a horrible OC Transpo story to tell, which is the Ottawa equivalent of TTC. I was on the bus with my son. We were going to visit some friends, and it's the 95. Those of you in Ottawa will know.
I know the 95.
You know the 95. Okay,
I lived in Ottawa.
So I'm there, and it's rush hour, so it's crowded. We're all packed in, and there is this young person, much younger than me, doing that young person thing that I think we all did at the time, where it's oh, it's -20 outside, but I need to be cool and I need to be doing my thing, so I'm not going to wear a coat. Right? I did it. I'm not here to judge that, but she was sick, and I'm like, well, that's what happens when you don't want to wear a coat in the wintertime. She coughed in my mouth.
Wow.
Right in my mouth. Did not cover her face, did not even make an attempt. It was just that's where that goes, in your face.
That is awful. And you got sick, didn't you?
And I got sick. So your listeners may hear me coughing and sniffling a bit because, of course, this bitch got me sick. I was like, if you don't want to wear a coat, that's one thing. That's you in your life. But, don't bring your foolishness into my life and my immune system. But it happened.
It happened. So even Ottawa Transit's got some work to do.
Yeah,
it's people.
It's people. It's just people. I think when you're just in a sufficiently large group of people in a sufficiently small confined space, you're just going to encounter some nonsense.
Yeah.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Oh, but Nadine, what a welcome. What a welcome. What a story. I'm already super enjoying this so much already. I know we're going to get serious in a minute, but just thank you so much for coming on the show. We really, really appreciate your presence here.
Thank you for having me. I love podcasts. So, this is dream come true for me.
For all of us.
Yes, we're living the dream.
We're living it. Yeah.
We're living the dream. We absolutely are. So I'm going to throw it over to JR. I know he has some questions for you.
Well, before we get into those questions, I have a curveball that some people liked that we did last week.
Ooh,
oh,
okay.
yeah. I forgot about that. My bad.
So in our first episode, we did something called 21 Questions.
Oh, okay.
So one of the questions from that episode was, if you pick one thing that you cannot live without.
No, one luxury.
Oh, yeah, see? Yeah, you pick.
Yeah,
you
pick one. So pick one luxury. One thing that's a luxury that you couldn't live without.
One thing that is a luxury that I could not live without. Okay. Is it my phone? No, I could live without my phone. I wouldn't like it, but I could live without it. You know what? My bed. My bed is amazing. I've spent so much time over the years, like, curating the components of my bed. I have like the perfect for me mattress. I have these pillows that have gel, like they have gel pillow. They're gel pillows, so they stay cool on the one side, and then they're propped up with another like super big fluffy down pillow. And I have like my perfect comforter, and the frame is one of those like hard frames, so I can sit up against my bed, like against the headboard of my bed and read. Like, no, I'm not like, yeah, I need my bed. I need my bed.
That bed sounds amazing. I think I need your bed.
It's one of my favorite places on earth. Come over to my house. You can hang out in my bed with me because it's queen sized.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes to that.
Yeah, my bed is lit.
So with all kinds of crazy, the whole concept is we talk to somebody about their mental health and their story, their journey, how they've overcome any type of trial or tribulation that they've been through. So for you, I guess we want to start with, what was life like growing up, going to school, family life? And I guess this is before you recognized there was any type of mental
health
issue.
Okay. So I grew up just outside of Toronto. So I grew up in a suburb, Ajax, Pickering, that area. And I was, holla. I was an only child. And I grew up, growing up, I was very imaginative and creative. I was always, pretending, and I loved to draw. I loved to put on little plays. And I was, I was also very emotional. So, whenever anything happened, I was either, at 100 where I was, just thrilled and happy and excited, or I was like at 0 and everything was terrible and I was crying and whatnot. And my parents were, they were loving and they were very supportive, but, as Black parents, immigrants to this country, they also had some pretty, some pretty definitive ideas about, what they wanted from me and where they wanted me to go, particularly in terms of my education. So, I was always, or I guess other people describe me as a bright child. When you're a child, you're like, I don't know, I'm just here living, being a kid. So when I first started off in school, like, it was really easy for me. I went into kindergarten knowing how to read, knowing how to write. Like, I was ahead of the curve. I was like, I don't know what all you fools are doing, but I'm reading and writing over here. And so in the beginning, I sort of got pegged as, being this very bright, competent student. But as I went further along in school, my performance became increasingly inconsistent. Sometimes I, was still performing at a really high level. In other subjects, I was struggling. And I remember that oftentimes my parents and my teachers didn't see it as a struggle. They saw it as I wasn't trying hard enough. I would have struggles, completing my homework, or I would, bring something home and I would just be like, I don't even know how to tackle this. And I would just sort of drop it and be like, well, let me go and focus on the stuff that I know how to do and I am good at. And so I got a lot of, from teachers, well, you're not living up to your potential. You need to try harder. And my parents, really wanted me to be successful in, I guess, what we would consider conventional ways. They wanted me to, perform well at school, get high grades, go to university, from there get a high paying job, have that sort of security. And I think they also wanted for people to see me as a valuable person, and being Black and a girl, they had a lot of their own anxiety around the fact that, people were going to see me as less than. And so I think they saw education and, being a high achiever in school as a way for me to, to sort of overcome that prejudice that other people were going to have. And so, they would get really upset when I would come home, and, there would be B's and sometimes there would be C's. And I'm pretty sure at least a couple times in high school there had to be D's, because my God, like chemistry, I had no clue. Like, yikes. And so I developed a lot of anxiety, I think, initially around school. When I knew I wasn't doing as well as people expected me to, that's when I first remember feeling a lot of anxiety. And then, something that I now, looking back, recognize also as a related depression. And, by the time I was in high school, my self-esteem was very, very low. And I, would always wonder, like, why can't I do this? Like, I want to do better than I am. Why can't I make myself, do this homework? Why can't I make myself more organized than I am? Why do I keep forgetting to do certain assignments? Why can I do so well with certain aspects of school, but I can't with others? It must be because I'm lazy. It must be because I don't care enough. It must be because there's something wrong with me. Like, must be this lazy person who cannot follow through on things and doesn't like to work hard. I just sort of accepted that because that's what people told me, in one way or another. You're not trying hard enough. You're not trying hard enough. And that was pretty demoralizing because I wanted to try, but it just didn't seem to work. And I had other issues too. Like, I was disorganized. And I was just I was an inconsistent performer, I would say, in that way.
Okay.
So, I guess, when did you, seek the advice or help of a medical professional to be diagnosed and to figure out what was going on, and what was the diagnosis?
So this has been an ongoing process. Probably about 15 years now. I just noticed that, like I said, I'd always been an emotional person, and I lived with some degree of anxiety most of my life. But there was a period in my life where I really felt like my level of anxiety is clearly disproportionate to things that are going on in my life. Like, I would, have these physiological symptoms, racing heart and like really severe muscle tension and just this feeling of like panic and something terrible is happening. And I'd look around and be like, nothing's happening. Mm-hmm. And so I went to my doctor and we talked about it. And my doctor first diagnosed me with anxiety. And so suggested, gave me sort of different options. I had a really good doctor. She wasn't quick to just be like, let's get you on medication, go home. She said, medication's an option for you. We can look into, therapeutic options. You can do a combination. So I opted to start with therapy, and that was helpful. And, but I always had these episodes, like I would sort of ebb and flow. Sometimes I would be pretty even, and then other times the anxiety would ratchet up. And that went on for a few years. And then several years later, I went through a year where I was having a really hard time. Like, I was sad a lot, and there were things going on, so I didn't necessarily think there was anything wrong until that summer. And it was a time in my life where things were actually going very, very well. I had just produced a play, and it had opened to relatively positive reviews. It was summer, my favorite time of year. I was, hanging out, doing fringe festival stuff with my friends. And I very clearly remember one day I was meeting some friends, like there were people I loved. And I walked up to the table and my brain kept telling me, nobody wants you here. Everyone here hates you. And I just knew, I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. There's something wrong with me. So I went back to my doctor, and that's when I was diagnosed with depression. And she explained that, yeah, if you live with chronic anxiety, depression is often a comorbidity. And so I was like, okay, great. So I have anxiety and depression, you know, these two things that go together. And so for a long time, I was just like, okay, that's what I have. I just have anxiety and depression, and I'm going to live with them. And, you know, that's the whole story. And so, you know, went through my life, and I have a son. And when my son was 7, he was diagnosed with ADHD. And so, you know, as many parents do when they have a child who has some kind of, you know, health issue, you know, I was like, let me learn about ADHD. Let me, you know, read things. Let me educate myself so I can, you know, better parent him and figure out what he needs. And so, you know, I was on a website one day and was reading something about, I think, ADHD in adolescence, because he's 11 now. And I was like, you know, how might this manifest as he's getting older? And came across an article about ADHD in girls and how it's often either misdiagnosed or missed entirely. And I read this profile, and it said, you know, with girls, it often tends to be issues around inattention as opposed to issues around hyperactivity, which is how it often manifests in boys. And so it gets missed because you don't have a child who's bouncing off the walls and running around and, you know, talking all the time. You know, may have a child who's still very quiet. You know, a child who, you know, may be very creative and imaginative and daydreams. And I was like, that sounds familiar. And then they talked about how it often manifests academically as, you know, a child who appears very bright, but has inconsistent performance in school and is often labeled as not living up to their potential, may seem lazy, has problems with disorganization, and the wheels are turning. And I'm like, And then the next thing I read was that often when ADHD goes undiagnosed, you have this comorbidity with anxiety and depression, because a person with undiagnosed ADHD, as they're trying to navigate their everyday life and doing things like, okay, let me get up, let me, you know, check my email, let me get myself ready for work, let me get my child ready for school. Those sort of simple everyday tasks that require something called executive functioning are really difficult when you have ADHD. So I was like, all right, then. This sounds really, really significant. And so long story short, I managed to find a clinic here in Toronto that does fairly extensive testing. They do psychiatric testing, and then they also do academic testing, like they test your IQ and whatnot, and they come up with a pretty extensive profile. And so I got a referral to the clinic, and I went, you know, for several sessions and did all of these different tests and spent a lot of time talking to a psychiatrist, and came away, and he was like, yeah, you have ADHD. You have there are 3 subtypes of ADHD. There's hyperactive, the hyperactive subset, which is the bouncing off the walls, like can't sit still kind. There's the impulsive type, which is just, I'm just going to do things and I can't really sort of think about the consequences of my actions. I'll just act and then be like, okay. And then there's the inattentive type, which is the type that I have, which just, it makes it difficult for me to focus on certain types of tasks. And what's interesting is it's called inattentive, but one of the features of it is that you also have something called hyperfocus, which is when you're very interested and engaged in something, you become so focused that it's hard for you to pull yourself away and do other things.
Which sounds like me.
Yeah. Yeah. When I get into writing, or I'm like fascinated by a topic, or, I'm painting or doing something that I'm really passionate about, it's like the whole world goes away and it's just that thing, which is why you have things like the inconsistent school performance. So for the topics that I was really interested in, I was like, I want to read everything. I want to learn about this. I'm really engaged. I hear everything you're saying. And when it's something that doesn't interest me, it's really hard for me to hold focus. It's really hard. So that diagnosis was really recent. That was like 3 months ago. I got that diagnosis. But when they were able to explain to me in depth how that manifests and how that's probably manifested throughout my life, it was like, oh, I was like, this is like a big piece. It felt like a big piece of the puzzle of who I am that just sort of clicked into place. And I was like, makes sense now. Totally makes sense.
So did you develop, like, before the diagnosis, did you develop little tricks to kind of help you along the way? Or
I did, and I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. I just thought, oh, okay, I'm just living. So, I have tricks even now that naturally my natural inclination is that I'm not an organized person at all. And so a way I've found of compensating for that is being extremely organized in certain facets of my life. And I'm a very visual person. So for example, I always used to organize my books on my bookshelf in alphabetical order, and I couldn't find my books. And so what I figured out a few years ago is I was like, let me organize them by color, because I recognize color and I remember what my books look like. So my bookshelf is organized by color.
I think JR's mind is blown right now.
I do that with my CDs. Like I used to do my DVDs and CDs and my records. I do that by color. Oh my gosh, you just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that's how my bookshelf is organized. I do a lot of color coding in my life. So if you look
I've seen your agenda. You've seen my agenda. I've seen your agenda.
I have different colors for different categories of items. I recently discovered something called bullet journaling, which is just a way of keeping like lists and dates and all sorts of things in a way that's sort of more organic to someone who has like a more scattered mind. So I have a lot of little organizational tricks like that. But what's interesting is if I don't work within those parameters I've given myself, I'm like an epic disaster. For example, I have a spot where I always put my keys when I come home. It's my key bowl, and I put my keys in the bowl because I'm like, that's where my keys are. But if for some reason I come home and, say my son's talking to me or the phone rings and I don't put my keys in the key bowl, I have no idea where they are. Like literally no idea. It's like it never happened. I'm like, they're in the house somewhere, but I'm like, they could be in the dryer for all I know. So I found I need to be super organized or I don't know what's going on.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's just one example of like a way I've found of compensating for my scattered brain.
So in the last 3 months, what things have you done in the last 3 months, I guess, since the diagnosis to kind of improve your life?
So one of the major thing that I did is for the first time in my life, I am actually on medication now. I never taken any medication to deal with my other mental health issues. And so I'm on a low dose of a medication called Wellbutrin.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about that.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
It did not work well for me. It wasn't your thing. I was given it for depression about 2 years ago. And I ended up having paralysis and like loss of speech. So it was like a bit of a shit show.
Which is really severe because it's a rare side effect, but one of the side effects can be seizures or like pretty serious neurological issues. So yeah, if you're having those kind of issues and you don't want to go there.
But it's working well for you.
It's working really well for me. I'm not having any side effects. And it's not that it's completely transformed my brain. I'm not suddenly somebody who's like, my executive functioning is on point. But what it's done for me is it's definitely diminished a lot of my anxiety, which does not help when you have a mind that is sort of already struggling to do things like just kind of, keep organized or keep focused. So it's really taken the edge off my anxiety, which has then allowed me to, implement some more of those strategies that kind of help me stay organized and work through my day. It also really helps, when I inevitably go off the rails, which I will. I've just sort of accepted that my brain is different than other people's and functions that way. It doesn't cause me as much anxiety as it used to. I'm just like, okay, this is the thing that happened. It was a little messy. I dropped the ball. It's fine. Pick up the ball. Keep going. As opposed to, I dropped the ball. My life is over. This is a catastrophe. It's helped in that way. And it does kind of, it makes it a little bit easier for me to focus. Like I can still tell, like naturally, my brain is kind of still ping-ponging, and I'm like, oh, I'm reading this book, something shiny, woohoo. But I can pull myself back to my tasks a little bit more easily. And so just having that edge taken off has already made a tremendous difference, where I'm like, all right, I'm just a little bit calmer. My brain is still busy, but it doesn't feel like a runaway freight train anymore. It feels more like a sports car now. Yeah.
So, but how hard was it to make that decision to actually take medication?
In one way, I would say was really easy, and in another way, it was really hard because, like I said, I have had various mental health diagnoses for 15 years, and it took me 15 years to get to the point where I was like, all right, let me take some medication. And so in that way, it took me a long time, and I couldn't even tell you why I was particularly resistant to medication, because I didn't think there was anything wrong with it in theory, but I think I was afraid that for some reason that if I took it, it would change me in some way and I wouldn't be me anymore.
I get that.
You get it?
Okay. Because when you first I find when you first are on medication, you aren't you. Like you're kind of in a zombie-like state. Like I'm heavily medicated. So like I tend to be in a bit of a zombie-like state, like when I'm getting weaned back on, because I'll go off of it thinking I'm fine.
Right.
And I could function. But I know in all reality, I need to stay on my meds even 1 or 2 days of missing or skipping. Like you feel completely differently.
Yeah, I missed taking my medication one day in these past few months, and I felt it. I was like, oh, I don't feel well today. But yeah, I think I just had this low-key irrational fear that I was going to take this medication and then I would not be Nadine anymore. And in a weird way, I was actually afraid like it would work and I would feel better, but I would have a different personality, and then I would have to make this choice between feeling okay and being this person that I value and cherish myself to be. But by the time I got to the ADHD diagnosis, I was struggling. Like I was really struggling. I was tired. Like I was just tired of waking up every single day and, having to go through so much just to like be able to think and like do the things that I needed to do. It was so much effort and I was so tired. And so at that point I was just like,
you'll try anything.
I'll do anything. Like I will do anything at this point, because I can't do this by myself anymore. I had everything else in place. I was like, I exercise regularly. I'm pretty good, in terms of what I eat. I was like, I have an amazing therapist. I have like a supportive home life with my husband. I have, supportive friends. I have everything else that's supposed to be in place to help your mental health, and it's not enough. And the psychiatrist that I saw as I was getting diagnosed said, all of those other things are helpful and important, and all those things are the reasons that I think you will be successful moving forward, but on their own, sometimes they're not enough, and that the medication can really facilitate these other things helping you more than they are. So if you're open to it, we can try it. And I was like, yes, please give me whatever you have at this point. I was like, I don't care. I'll try. And I got really lucky because, we talked about the fact that like with you, Wellbutrin doesn't work for everyone. And that, we might have to, tweak or maybe try something else entirely. And that was going to be a process. And I just got lucky. And the first thing that I tried has so far worked.
And that is in the medication world, that is lucky, because it's just like we're like kind of guinea pigs a little bit.
And everyone's body chemistry is different. And
you never know what's going to work or what's not going to work, the side effects. Like I've had some gnarly side effects.
And in the past, like I've had not great luck with just completely other kinds of medications, which is maybe why I was nervous about trying it too. Like, years ago when I was on the pill, like it just fucked me up like 6 ways from Sunday. And, other medications I've had when I've been in the hospital, like, yeah, I've had like really intense side effects. And so I was prepared for this to be, months and months of trying different things, but it worked. It worked.
That's good.
Thank you, ancestors. Praise the ancestors.
So how has having ADHD affected your professional, your work life?
It's made certain things really challenging. So I work for myself as a sexuality educator. And when you work for yourself, there's the part of my job that I love where I'm like, I get to, make my job whatever I want it to be. And so, I create a lot of, different content. I create videos and I, write workshops and, all of that stuff is great. Like that's, where I'm, firing on all cylinders. That's how I am naturally. But then there's all this other stuff in running a business, like, keeping receipts and filing your taxes.
That's what I have JR for.
Yeah. And having a social, having a marketing strategy and, keeping a schedule and managing your time. And I am not good at any of that stuff. That stuff does not come naturally to me. And I think even if I did not have an ADHD brain, that's just not the way that I function. There's not the stuff that interests me. But with an ADHD brain, I'm just like, oh my God. So thank goodness I have a partner who those are all of his strengths. He's organized, he's meticulous, he's good with money. Last night he did our taxes because he likes doing taxes. Like he does that stuff for fun.
So weird.
So I know.
I like doing
but
taxes.
bless him because he's a really great supportive person to have in my life. And so I'll be real, like not infrequently in my work business life, those sort of practical aspects will often kind of get away from me, and then I'll have a little crisis where I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? Like I was supposed to be keeping receipts and I forgot to store. I don't know where I put my receipts, and I forgot to keep a bunch of them, and what do I do? And I'll have people in my life who are like, okay, let's try and help you and maybe try a new system of filing and keeping things and whatnot. So I think that's going to be an ongoing process and struggle for me in my business. Now that I know what's going on with my brain, something that I'm really looking forward to is sort of maybe discovering systems that may not work for other people, but might work for me, because most of my life I've tried to force myself to emulate, models of organization, record keeping, time management, that I think work for neurotypical people, and I'm not neurotypical. So it was like, I may have to discover different ways of doing things.
Well, Nadine, that was quite a story, and I really appreciate you telling it.
Thank you for inviting me to tell it. I love telling my story because I like to talk a lot.
You and me both, honey. Well, if you guys want to reach out to Nadine, show your love and support, or maybe talk to her about mental health, JR, tell them how they can reach her and us.
Yeah, definitely. You can reach us at dysh at DaintyDysh.com. That's DYSH at DaintyDysh, DAINTY. Yeah, I love when I mess that up. DaintyDysh.com, DaintyDysh.com. You can also check us out on Best of Onika and Best of JR on Instagram. I'm just doing everything backwards today. I'm just being thrown off.
It's a backwards kind of day. It's all kinds of crazy.
It's all kinds of crazy, I guess. Yeah, definitely. So, what's going on OnikaDainty.com?
I got some poetry, some short stories, or not short stories, blogs, and journal entries going on the website right now. So definitely check them out. They're personal and dear to my heart, and there's some good stuff on there.
Wicked. Well, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please
give us a 5. We deserve a 5.
And subscribe. If you're listening to us on, YouTube, SoundCloud, or any other platform, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe there and give us a like or give us a comment. We really appreciate it. And Onika will definitely respond to your comments.
Oh, I will.
All right. Well, that's it for me.
Well, it has been all kinds of crazy Wednesdays, second Wednesday of every month. Don't you forget it. And I hope y'all have yourselves a very, very happy hump day.